Friends and viewers, the Bhagawad Gita, one of the sacred texts of Hindu literature, and it is written, the author is anonymous and nobody knows who had written it, but this is a most important literature in Hindu literature, and also the Bhagavad Gita. It is a section of the sixth book of Mahabharata, an important Sanskrit epic in the Hindu tradition that recalls a lengthy struggle and a brief war between two sides of the Bharata family, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, over their kingdom of Hastinapura. The Gita recounts a dialogue in the moments leading up to the war between Pandava warrior Arjuna and his charioteer trusted advisor Krishna, who turns out to be a worldly incarnation of Vishnu, a god who serves as the supreme being in many forms of Hinduism. However, Arjuna and Krishna's dialogue is actually recounted through a framed story. Sanjaya, an advisor to Dhritarashtra, the Kaurav's father and the blind king of Hastinapura, reports this dialogue to the king after the Pandavas have already won the war. In the first of the Gita's 18th section of discourses, Sanjaya described the extensive Pandava and Kaurava armies that meet to fight on the field of Dharma. While the Kauravas have more men and Pandavas seem to have the gods' favor as they respond to the Kauravas' impressive coach horns with divine ones that shake the earth and sky. As Krishna drives Arjuna's chariot into the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna realizes that he cannot bear to kill his cousin, which he believes would destroy the dharma or moral standing of his entire family and poison any pleasure he might derive from the victory. He lowers his weapon and begins to weep. Krishna reprimands Arjuna at the beginning of the second discourse, calling him a coward and suggesting that he is blind to the fundamental truth that the people's soul do not die with their bodies. Rather, the eternal soul is reincarnated in another body. So Arjuna should not grieve for his family member, but instead follow his dharma as the Kshatriya, a warrior by fighting. If he wins the war, Arjuna will rule the earth. If he loses, he will ascend to heaven. But if he refuses to fight, he will disgrace himself. In addition to grasping these truths intellectually, Krishna says that people can learn to stop clinging to the fruits of action, turn away from the false realm of senses, and free themselves from negative emotion by practicing yoga. Each of these routes promises to help people dissolve their sense of self, transcend the material world, and blissfully reunite with the absolute being called Brahma. And the third discourse, Arjuna asks why Krishna wants him to act if he believes that enlightenment comes from restraining one's impulse to action. Krishna argues that everyone must act by virtue of being in the world, but that these actions are the working of material elements called gunas rather than the will of the individual soul. The only pure form of action is sacrifice to the gods, which leads the gods to sustain human life on earth. Krishna begins to reveal his true nature to Arjuna in the fourth discourse. He is eternal, intervenes in the universe whenever necessary to maintain dharma and dedicates himself to those who perform sacrifices for him, especially those who sacrifice their knowledge by surrendering it to him. In the fifth discourse, Arjuna notes that the renunciation of action, samnyasa, and yoga, which is the form of action, seem to be opposite. Yet Krishna considered both as a viable means to enlightenment. Krishna replies that yoga is a means to renunciation because it allows people to overcome their ignorant motivation for action. In the sixth discourse, Krishna explained this meditative yogic discipline allows people to understand their unity in Brahman with all other beings, which can lead them to transcend the cycle of rebirth, samsara, or at the very least reincarnate into purer bodies. In the seventh discourse, Krishna explained that he truly encompasses everything from all the material things that comprise the earth to his higher being and the force that creates and dissolves the world. His true being is formless, timeless, and beyond all dualities. He loves the wise few who understand these fundamentals. In discourse 8, Krishna suggests that people can transcend rebirth and join him directly if they learn to fix their minds on their constantly and particularly the moment of death. The ninth discourse expands on Krishna's all-pervasive nature, absolute power over the world and providence over those who worship him. In the 10th and 11th discourse, Krishna turns from an intellectual explanation of his power to concrete demonstration of it. The god professes his love for Arjuna, who in return acknowledge him as the highest being of all and ask about his divine form. Krishna begins to enumerate these forms, declaring himself the greatest of each kind of thing, person, and force that exist in the world, as well as the characteristic in virtue of which such kind exists at all. He is wisdom among the wise and authority among the rulers, silence among the hidden and the ancient seed of all being. But Krishna's numerous descriptions barely scratch the surface of his infinite power. He shows himself to Krishna in the 11th discourse, taking on a form with innumerable eyes, mouths, and limbs that seems to contain everything, including infinite light, all the Bharata warriors, the entire world, and all other gods. Arjuna worshipped Krishna with shock and fear, apologizing for his ignorance and asking the incomparable one for mercy and patience. Krishna notes that nobody, not even the gods, has seen this form before. After securing Arjuna's eternal fealty, Krishna goes to explain that it is easier for devotees to worship his embodied form than to grasp his true formless self, and offers practical advice for Hindus of different disposition. In his 12th discourse, in the 13th, he distinguished the body from the eternal immaterial soul that bears various bodies on its ways to enlightenment. The gunas that comprise the body and the mind, the soul to it, sattva, purity, rajas, passion, and tamas, ignorance, are the subject of the Krishna's 14th discourse. By relinquishing rajas and tamas for the sake of sattva, people can rise up toward disembodiment through the cycle of reincarnation, samsara. Krishna begins the following discourse with the image of holy avatar tree, which roots saying the strong acts when I alone. By relinquishing one's attachment action, one can overcome even the most firmly rooted connection to the world and integrate oneself with the indestructible eternal spirit that lies behind him. In the sixth discourse, Krishna distinguished characteristics of the divine person nearing enlightenment like truthfulness, self-control, discipline, compassion, and courage from those greedy, angry, demonic people who turn away from Vedic laws and elevate desire above God. Arjuna asked Krishna to elaborate the Vedic ritual in the seventh discourse, and the Lord tells him that Sattvic people perform sacrifice according to Vedic law in order to honor the gods and without any simultaneous material goal. He also outlines three forms of food: bodily discipline, gift-giving accordance. In the final discourse, Krishna emphasized the distinction between renouncing all action, which usually happen because of desire, and action for action's sake without an attachment to the consequence of desire. People who can relinquish this interest in the fruits of action are called Tyagis, and in their action they perceive all being as eternal dimension of the same unified whole, following their dharma fearlessly and steadfastly. He notes that dharma often follows one position in the caste system, which in turn affects people's inner nature, and emphasizes that one must fulfill this prescribed role, even if imperfectly, in order to purify oneself. Accordingly, Krishna implores Arjuna once again to fight the war, but reminds him that the decision is his alone. Finally, Krishna requests Arjuna's absolute devotion and charges him with spreading the Gita's message to those sufficiently disciplined and devoted to properly receive this highest hidden truth. Arjuna resolutely agrees. In Gita's closing line, the minister Sanjayana expresses gratitude and enthusiasm at hearing Krishna's words and declares that Arjuna is blessed to bring splendor, victory, well-being, and wise conduct wherever he goes, which suggests that Pandavas are destined to win back Hastinapura. So this is the story of the Bhagavad Gita's line, the conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. So how Arjuna was reluctant to go to the war, but he convinces him to go and fight on the way of God, on the way of a good soul, because the body will perish, but your soul will remain. I thought, so this is the part of the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita. So Mahabharata, including Bhagavad Gita, is historical as well as literary, religious text. For one other record from the time of his composition survived to the present day. Scholars had widely debated the historically validity and circumstances of Kshatriya war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. It is traditionally dated to 3137 BC, although Western archaeologists often date it closer to 1000 BC. By this time, large-scale political institutions had come to rule large swaths of territory in India. So this is the part of the name of this title is the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, it means Song of God, and it is likely taken place in northern India. Some commentators believe it was written in cave near village of Badrinath. So ancient Indian literature, it is an epic poem, Hindu religious scripture, philosophic dialogue. A setting of this book is a battlefield in the kingdom of Hastinapura, present-day northern India. Climax, Krishna reveals a multitude of divine form, convincing Arjuna to worship him and devote himself to the war. The antagonist or the opposite of his Arjuna's ignorance and cowardice, the Kaurav's earthly reincarnation. Point of view dialogue narrated by Sanjaya. So this is the words and a text and the background of Bhagawad Gita, the divine song. Thank you very much.